The conservative that's running is stupidly no friend of mine. I don't know him, but he said negative things. So when he says negative things, I couldn't care less. I think it's easier to deal, actually, with a liberal, but I don't really care. It doesn't matter to me at all.
There you go. That's the Donald. He's out there picking Canada's next leader like it's his personal reality show. Carney's in, Poilievre's out. But here's the twist. I mean, is this Trump playing 4D chess to mess with Canadian voters, or does he really think Carney's the key to his America First agenda? Leighton Gray is a constitutional lawyer and the host of a fantastic podcast called Gray Matter. Leighton, welcome back. How are you?
I'm great, Richard. It's a privilege to be back on your program.
So Trump's endorsement, if we can call that, call it that, of Mark Carney seems to flip the script. I mean, do you see this as a deliberate ploy to undermine Carney by tying him to a polarizing figure like Trump, or does it, I don't know, signal genuine preference for a more pliable Canadian leader?
It could be all of that, but as I've said on previous visits to your program and in our discussions, I think you know my view, and that is that the CPC and the Liberals are really small players in a bigger game. And in fact, I saw a meme today that was posted on my X page, which really describes this very well. There's a picture of a cow. On the left, it says vote Liberal. On the right, it says vote Conservative. But each cattle door leads to a door called 51st State. And the reality is that what's going on, big picture, is a confrontation, is a high noon, if you will, between MAGA, which is a representation of preservation or renovation or renaissance of the American nation state. The idea that a nation can define its own borders, can be self-determining, can make its own laws, and of course the up against that is this encroaching globalism, which has really overtaken Canada. It's overtaken Canada politically, economically, socially, and culturally, and it's reached its apex now with Mark Carney, who really is a poster child for this. And in a broader context, let's talk about just one thing that Mark Carney has done recently. Well, he announced a $6 billion project for radar in the Arctic, and he's partnered us with, of all countries, Australia in this. Well, it doesn't take a $6 billion radar, Richard, to go up to the Arctic and see 30 Russian nuclear-powered icebreakers and a massive nuclear-powered battleship. Canada has 2 old, beaten-up diesel icebreakers up there, and an unfinished ice station base up there that I think was commissioned back in 1867 and still hasn't been completed. So the big picture is, I think Mr. Trump is concerned about the geopolitical picture, the huge geopolitical picture. And what he's saying, what I heard him saying, is essentially he doesn't care who's the Prime Minister of Canada. He's got a bigger game afoot. You call it 4D chess, and really these other people are small players in it.
Let's hear what Pierre Poilievre, or how Pierre Poilievre responded to Trump's seeming endorsement of Mark Carney.
It's clear that President Trump wants the Liberals in power because they will keep this country weak. After 10 years in power, the Liberals have given us the weakest economy in the G7. They've doubled our housing costs, driven $500 billion to the south, all while Mark Carney was economic advisor to Trudeau.
There you go. Trump's called Poilievre not a MAGA guy, no friend. First of all, I'm wondering, maybe he's confusing him with Doug Ford. What do you think?
Well, possibly, but Trump is right in one sense, and this is sort of my lament as a Canadian voter. In my ideal world, and I don't think this is asking too much, as a Canadian voter in an upcoming election, presumably we're going to have one, I pray that we do, I would like to have the same choice that Americans had last November. Say what you like about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, at least they offered Americans a very clear choice. There was no mixing them up. It was like Sesame Street. One of these things was not like the other. And I think that what Canadians really want, and I listen to them every day as you do on your show, what Canadians want is a clear choice. They want a choice between let's say, a true small c conservative option, maybe something that looks a little bit more like MAGA. Let's call it Maple MAGA. And what the Liberals are offering, we know what the Liberals are offering. We know what Mark Carney is. He's really sort of the next phase of Trudeau and leftist liberalism in Canada. But I think what Mr. Poilievre, I think he's really missing the bus here. And I think that if he would make a bit of a, not a full right turn, but maybe a partial right turn into conservatism and maybe adopted some of what Donald Trump is doing in the United States, I happen to think that Canadians would respond very favorably to that, at least in terms of providing us with a clear option, another option in an upcoming election, because unfortunately, it looks very much like Mr. Poilievre is going to repeat the mistakes that happened in the last two federal elections, where really we were offered liberal and liberal light, and you know, and of course enough Canadian voters voted for the Liberals in sort of what it was an electoral cola wars. You know, I want an uncola. I want something other than what we've had for the last 10 years. And I think most Canadians, many millions of us are like-minded in that respect.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, and I don't know, who. It seems like different people within Poilievre's circle have his ear on different days, because some days he seems like he's on the cusp of, breaking out into being more of a, right of center, more true conservative, and then he on another day he seems to retreat. But don't we have that MAGA Maple choice really with Max Bernier?
Yes, yes, in a sense, but the problem is, with Max Bernier, and I like the man, I like a lot of what he says, but let's face it, he's been the only leader of that party since he formed it several years ago, and he hasn't been able even to get elected into parliament. And so I don't think that party yet has enough broad-based recognition in the Canadian electorate to be a realistic option at this point, which is a shame. But I must commend Max Bernier for doing something and that you'll appreciate as a fellow media personality. Max Bernier is taking up the invitations, it appears, of people like Joe Rogan and other major podcasters in the United States. But Poilievre strangely turned this down. And I happen to think that this is one of the most brilliant moves that Donald Trump did during last summer's U.S. election campaign, when he took up the opportunity, sat down for over 2 hours with Joe Rogan and other podcasters. And this is something that was not really, that Kamala Harris turned down. The Democrats wouldn't do it. And I happen to think that was a huge factor in expanding his already large popularity. And I think if Mr. Poilievre took advantage of that, I mean, just look how many people watched his interview on the Jordan Peterson podcast that was, I think, recorded last November. That led to a huge boost in his popularity. And frankly, I don't know why the people who are advising people like Poilievre and Doug Ford, and for that matter, Danielle Smith in Alberta, are not telling him, hey, this is a tremendous opportunity. 13, 14 million viewers, listening to you basically present your electoral campaign. And we should not discount how many Canadians are watching programs like Joe Rogan.
Yeah, in terms of Poilievre, I hope Jenny Byrne is listening, because, yeah, he needs to get on Joe Rogan, no question. And that's the rumor that Mad Max will be on Joe Rogan. We'll see, if that moves the needle for him. He seems to be stuck in that 3% doldrums, and now he's going back to Quebec to run in Beauce, his old riding. Why doesn't Trump throw us conservatives a bone, though? I mean, why does he want to saddle us with, another 4 years or 10 years of these progressive globalists?
Well, I have my own theory, and people won't like it very much. I think the Trump administration has their own plans for Canada, and I think that whatever Canadian politicians are doing, I think the Trump team considers them irrelevant. One way or the other, the Trump administration has important plans for this continent that include Canada, and I think Donald Trump has been signaling very consistently, if you read between the lines, that his main interest in Canada is not economic. It's not in terms of tariffs. Remember that he was able to renegotiate NAFTA in 2017 without threatening to annex Canada. He has the upper hand. in this trade war. Only 1% of America's trade is with Canada. And in fact, the United States only does about 24% of their GDP comes from foreign trade. So what he says that he doesn't need Canada's trade, he means it. I think Trump's main concern is military. I think he's very concerned about what's going on in the Arctic. He's very concerned about what happened in Panama. A lot of people don't realize this because it doesn't make it into the mass media, but the Panamanian president has taken money from the CCP to sign on to the Belt and Road Initiative. And the Chinese have installations at both ends of that Panama Canal. And I think that Donald Trump, basically with the tariffs, I would say it's a means to an end. I think what he's signaling is what I've been saying for a long time, at least a year. I think I said it last year in your program, that if he became president, he was going to take a much closer interest in the domestic politics of Canada. And Canadians need to understand we're not living in the 1990s Canada. We're living in a Canada that is dominated right now by the globalists. We have an unelected prime minister who wants to make us part of the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a president who's saying, not a chance, not going to happen. The one thing that Donald Trump consistently does is he doesn't let you sit on the fence. You always have to take a position with him. That's if you read the Art of the Deal, that's part of the way he operates. But I happen to think that these tariffs, I think he's very serious about tariffs, and I don't think it has a lot to do with getting a better trade deal with Canada, because annexation of Canada is a totally unnecessary step in terms of getting a better trade deal. And I happen to think that what he's really talking about, whether it means extinguishment of Canadian sovereignty or having Canada be more aligned militarily, economically, philosophically with the United States, somewhere in there, that's what Donald Trump is talking about. He's looking big picture. He's securing American hegemony against the encroaching globalists who are backed, let's face it, by the Chinese Communist Party.
Yeah, I agree. I call it Monroe Doctrine 2.0. The Monroe Doctrine.
Description.
In the 1820s, it was about limiting European influence in North America. This is about limiting Chinese influence in North America.
Yeah.
And I also, in my monologue, I said, what do we want? Do we want to be cozying up to, the EU, which is basically crumbling,
Right.
or do we want to join Fortress North America, I call it? And I think those are the two choices. We're going to have to make it. How is this going to play out in the election, in our election, do you think? Is this going to ultimately hurt? Maybe ultimately, as you say, it doesn't matter, but is it going to hurt Poilievre or help him?
That depends on how he reacts to it. I don't like what I heard, that clip that you played. I'm hoping and praying that he's going to perhaps change tack, as you described, and maybe present Canadians with the more small c conservative option, because the platform that he has right now, it's difficult to distinguish it on many fronts from what Mark Carney is offering. And of course, in the meanwhile, Mark Carney is stealing a lot of the conservative platform. He's already brought the carbon price down to zero. He hasn't canceled the consumer carbon tax, but he's brought that carbon price down to zero. And I suspect we're going to be hearing about how he's been over in Europe rekindling some of the LNG deals that Trudeau dropped with Europe. And that's going to play very well out in Alberta. And that's probably going to be a boost to our economy. Don't be surprised when he attends the G7 in Kananaskis, Alberta, up in the mountains, and he invites Mr. Zelensky there, that there's some announcement from the Liberals about how they're going to be selling liquid natural gas, rebranded clean natural gas, to parts of Europe.
Yeah, we always have to listen to the French translation or his version of French to figure out what he really means. He says one thing in English, another in French. However, Leighton, how do we listen to Grey Matter, the podcast?
Well, we're everywhere you find podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, Apple. But the best way to follow our content is on our X page until Mark Carney cancels it. And folks, he's threatening that. But it's at Grey Matter Convo. You'll find all of our content there. And it's been a pleasure being on your program and speaking with your audience, Richard. Thanks very much.
Always enjoy a visit from you, Leighton. Thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
You too. Hey, this is Richard Serrett. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe.